Hello, friends. Today is Juneteenth, and so I'm recording this a day before our gathering tomorrow. I hope you've had time today to reflect on the meaning of this. It's new federal holiday, and to pray and meditate, chew on folks who have lived a much harder reality, and the God who frees captives, liberates. So, jumping in, I want to start today with a fill in the blank. And here it is. How would you fill in this blank? My life would be okay if I just had blank. Might be a tough question to face head on, but what is it? What would need to happen? What do you need to have before you'd say, now I'm happy, now I'm okay? You know, it's the person who thinks they'll be okay if they can just receive the right validation. They go get a PhD, they get a successful job, they get a fancy house, a fancy car, they receive all kinds of recognition and awards, but every bit of validation is a mirage. They still don't feel, they feel like an imposter. They don't feel the way they want to feel. At the end of the day, they can't say, life is good, I did good. Or it's the person who seems to generate conflict everywhere they go. It's like they have an axe to grind with everyone, and kind of like they won't be okay unless they are the victor, the winner. But every time they win an argument or a debate or whatever, it doesn't quench their thirst for victory. And at the end of the day, their argument that they're trying to win really isn't with anyone else. It's somewhere deep inside of them. It's every person who would say, my life would be okay if I can make everyone laugh. If people liked me, or if I knew what to do with my life, or if I had a trophy buck on the wall, or a trophy lover in my bed, or a better job, or if I didn't have to constantly worry about money, or if I could live wherever I want, or if I could do whatever I want, my life would be okay. If dot dot dot. Well, our Bible story today, it's a story that explores this question: what do we think we need to be okay? And it's a story of overreaching. So when you overreach, you are searching, you're reaching beyond what it is that would actually fill that blank. You're going beyond. And our Bible story invites us to explore our own inner world. How do I strategize? What motivates me? What desires do I carry? What is it that I want? The world's full of people who are chasing what they want. And there are a lot of people who the longer they live, it's not like, oh, I reached, and I got it. There are a lot of people who it's like their thirst is unquenched. Dead end. It's been said, they prop their ladder up against the wrong wall, overreaching. And that kind of stuff generates a lot of conflict for people, internal and external. And so our story today shows us a God who wants to free us of how we fill in that blank. Well, my life would be okay if dot dot dot. This is part 3 in our series, First Family series, walking through the book of Genesis. This story comes from a large chunk of scripture, Genesis 25 through 35. And our story begins with 2 brothers, Jacob and Esau. So their parents, Isaac and Rebekah, had gone through 20 years of childlessness, 20 years before they conceived. And so these 2 little boys growing inside of Rebecca, they were not the kinds of infants, even in the womb, who just suck their thumb. They were having an all-out wrestling match, these two twin boys in Rebecca's womb. Rebecca's womb felt like a WWF wrestling mat, and her internal organs were the ropes that the wrestlers are bouncing off of. And it was so concerning, this wrestling match, that Rebecca actually asked God. It's recorded in Genesis, like, why is this happening to me? And God responded, two nations are in your womb. Two peoples from within you will be separated. Remember that from last week? One people will be stronger than the other. The older will serve the younger. And so at birth, Esau was the first brother to come out. His name meant rough or hairy, both of which described him. He's quite the red baby. And there was hardly a moment to pay much attention to Esau because as he came out, here's this little hand. Jacob, he's got a firm grasp on Esau's heel. Even in birth, it's like the wrestling match was still on. He's not going to let go. And his name, the root of his name is overreacher or heel holder, supplanter, replacer. It's somehow I'm going to win. Now, in our day, we'd say Jacob had the makings of a good free safety in the NFL. Almost stopped Esau before he crossed the end zone. As these two boys grew up, their differences became more and more pronounced. Esau was a hairy man. He was a hunter of the field. He was Isaac's favorite son. Isaac loved Esau. He loved everything Esau did. Jacob, on the other hand, he was a smooth man. He was a man of the tent, not the field. He was a cook. And he was Rebekah's favorite. Rebekah loved Jacob. But in a family in that day, it really didn't matter if mom loved you as far as the power structure of the family. Being mom's favorite wasn't going to gain you any kind of like family leadership or inheritance. Now, that's a significant detail for our story, though, that as Jacob's growing up, his dad loves his brother and his mom loves him. You remember our question? My life would be okay. My life would be okay if ... Well, Jacob, the overreacher, the heel holder, he was always looking for some way to get ahead of his brother Esau. And so one day here comes Esau. He's coming into the tent. He's absolutely ravenous. He's just returned from the open country and he's famished. And so the smell of this stew that Jacob just finished making is wafting through the tent. And Esau says, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm just famished." And where most people would not see an opportunity at all, Jacob saw one. He says, "First, sell me your birthright." And Esau says, "Look, I'm about to die. What good is a birthright to me?" Well, to Esau, it's like this entire conversation, this isn't a real thing. I'm hungry, and Dad would never go along with this. Dad isn't going to let me give away my birthright to you anyways. But to Jacob, this conversation was real. He says, "No, swear to me first." And so Esau swore his birthright to Jacob. Now, the idea was that whenever dad dies, the family estate is divided into the number of sons plus one, and the oldest son gets the plus one. They get the double portion of the estate, and they get the deathbed blessing of dad, which had all kinds of like family leadership implications. So years go by after this, and that moment, selling the birthright, it really wasn't a big deal to Esau. because he's thinking, Isaac really, my dad's not going to go along with it, and so I'm still going to get the birthright. Well, the day came that Isaac decided, yeah, it's time to give Esau the deathbed blessing. So exactly right. That's who he's going to give it to. Isaac was 130 years old. He was losing his vision. He was nearly blind. And Esau and Jacob were in their 70s. And it was time. So Isaac tells Esau, he says, look, why don't you go hunt some wild game and go prepare my favorite dish, and then I'll give you my blessing. And so it was a big moment. So Esau heads out. Now, Rebekah did not want the birthright to go to Esau. She wanted it to go to Jacob, her favorite son, the overreacher, the heel holder. After all, hadn't God said, like 70 years earlier, hadn't God said the older will serve the younger? And so mother and son, Rebekah and Jacob, concocted a plan to fool dad, fool Isaac. And so while Esau is out hunting, they do this plan, and it was not child's play. The stakes were high. They knew what they were doing. Isaac, he had inherited all of Abraham's wealth, and then he had built upon it. So we're talking about a lot of wealth here. Who's going to receive 2/3 of that wealth? Which son? And who's going to receive the blessing? Well, Rebekah cooked up this plan. It wasn't Jacob. It was mom. It was Rebekah. She made Isaac's favorite dish herself. She helped cover Jacob's hands and his neck with goat skins so that he'd feel hairy. She dug Esau's clothes out so that Jacob could wear them so that he would smell like Esau. And then finally he walked into dad, to Isaac. He's got this tasty plate of goat meat and bread. And here's Jacob, the con artist, the overreacher. He goes in to his father, to Isaac's deathbed blessing. Trickery, lies, falsehood, counterfeiting, fraud. Isaac doesn't buy it right away because he hears this voice and he's like, that's not Esau, that's Jacob. But then he feels his son and he feels hairy. Oh, maybe that is Esau. And Rebekah really had thought of everything because Jacob leans in to kiss his father, and Isaac smells him and he's like, that's Esau. That smells exactly like him. And so he takes the bait and he gives Jacob, the wrong son, the deathbed blessing. He says, may God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you. May peoples bow down to you. May you be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Now, no sooner had Jacob slipped out of the room after receiving the blessing than here comes Esau. This is a huge moment in his life, and there's Isaac laying on the bed. And Esau comes in, he says, here, father, will you sit up, please? Can you sit up and eat so that you can give me your blessing? Who are you? Isaac says. I'm your son. I'm your firstborn. I'm Esau. Well, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I just ate it? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed. And Esau knew right away what had happened. He burst out crying bitterly. He says, bless me too, my father. Like, I just missed my moment. But in those days, a blessing was considered as binding as a legal document. It wasn't something that was easily undone. And so Esau suffered two injustices this day, Jacob took both his birthright and his blessing. And Esau begged his dad for some kind of an option B blessing. Like, somehow, give me something here. And Isaac said, look, I've made Jacob lord over you, and I've made all of his relatives, all of his relatives, his servants, and I've sustained him with grain and new wine. What can I possibly do for you, my son? It's a world of limited goods. And the tears of 70-year-old Esau came pouring down as he begged his dad, give me some kind of blessing, please. And for reasons that are difficult to understand, Isaac stammers out. He says, well, your dwelling is going to be away from earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven, and you'll live by the sword, and you'll serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you'll throw his yoke from off your neck. And that day, something dark and sinister began to grow inside of Esau, as we can imagine many brothers might do. Esau began to envision killing his brother. He envisioned his brother's blood running into the dark soil. Killing was his skill. He's a hunter. How's he going to do it? What weapon will he choose? Will he do it slowly or with quickly? Will he do it with delight? He began to imagine this. He began to talk about it. How I'm going to take Jacob's life. It's the Cain option all over again. The only thing keeping him from it was the fact that Dad was still alive. Isaac is still alive, and Isaac wouldn't be happy with this. Now, Rebekah caught wind of what Esau was saying, his plan to kill Jacob, and she intervened once again. She sold Isaac on the idea, we need to send Jacob away to my brother Laban so that he can find a wife there. Like, let's get him out of here. It wasn't really about finding a wife. It was about saving Jacob's life. But she didn't tell Isaac that. She just says, we need to find him a wife. And then she tells Jacob the real scoop. She says, flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran and stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. And then when your brother's no longer angry with you and forgets what you did, then I'll send word and you can come back here. Because I don't want to lose both of you in one day. And so in the face of the Cain option, remember the Cain option is killing, Jacob practiced it's the Abraham and Hagar option, it's separation. And he flees. He ran away to Uncle Laban. He was separated from his brother for 20 years, a 20-year separation. And during those 20 years, he gained 4 wives, 11 sons, who knows how many daughters, lots of wealth, flocks, herds, slaves. Without telling all the stories from those 20 years, it's enough to say that Jacob continued to be the overreacher. He continued to wrestle his way through life. I'm going to win. He was deceptive. He was cunning. He was a strategist, the heel holder, the overreacher. And God was present every step of the way with Jacob. God was there working. Now, one day God said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and go back to your relatives. I'm going to be with you. And so just like his last separation from his family, it's not any prettier this time. His exit from his uncle Laban, it's a big family mess. But finally he's on his way home, which means he's going to have to face his dad, who loves his brother, and he's going to have to face his brother, Esau, who 20 years earlier wanted to kill him. And so he sent messengers ahead of him to his brother with specific instructions. Your servant Jacob says, this is what they're supposed to say. Your servant Jacob, keyword is servant, I've been staying with Laban. I've remained there until now. I have cattle, I have donkeys, I have sheep, I have goats, I have male and female servants, and now I'm sending this message to my Lord. Notice he's calling Esau his Lord, that I may find favor in your eyes. Translation, look, Dad said that you're going to be my servant and that I'm going to be your Lord, but I'm not claiming that. I am your servant. You are my Lord. You're the boss, buddy, and I don't need to fight you about the inheritance anymore. That's what he's trying to say. And so he keeps repeating this goal over and over, that I may find favor in your eyes. Well, the messengers return and they have bad news. They say Esau's coming and he's got 400 men with him. And Jacob went into a panic. He was seriously afraid for his life and the life of his entire family. And so his inner strategist turned on full gear, goes into action. He divided his family, he divided his flocks and his herds and his slaves, everything into two separate groups. He said, if Esau comes and attacks one group, at least the other one might escape. And he began to pray desperately. He says, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, 'Go back to your country and to your relatives, and I will make you prosper.'" He said, "I'm small. I'm insignificant. I'm unworthy of all the kindness and the faithfulness that you've shown to your servant. And I had only with me my staff when I crossed this Jordan River, but now I've become two camps." He's separated, and this is how big I am. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I'm afraid that he's going to come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you've said that I will surely make you prosper and make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which can't be counted. Remember our starting question? My life would be okay if I just had ... Jacob has bested his brother. He's bested his uncle. He has his father's blessing. He has his older brother's birthright. He's got 4 wives. He's got children galore, servants galore, livestock galore. He's exceedingly wealthy. What more could the overreacher need? And now he's afraid of losing it all to his murderous brother. It's like, this is a wrestling match that I can't afford to lose. So can you hear Cain and Abel in the background there? Am I my brother's keeper? Well, Jacob wasn't only praying. His inner strategist was in high gear. And so he starts sending gifts to his brother. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys, and a servant in charge of each of the herds. And each servant is supposed to say, "These belong to your servant Jacob, and they are a gift to my lord Esau, and he's coming behind us." And each servant was, it was emphasized, you tell him your servant Jacob is coming behind us. So he's really emphasizing the whole servant and Lord language there. And Jacob's thought was, I will appease him with all of these gifts that I'm sending on ahead. And then later when I see him, perhaps he'll receive me. So all the gifts are given, and Jacob spends a night by the stream, but he cannot sleep. And so he gets up in the night and he sends his family and his servants across the stream. It's like one more barrier to keep my brother at bay from those who are most precious to me. And then he sends all of his possessions across the stream. One more barrier. Have you ever stood on the edge of what feels inevitable? You're trying to keep everything dear to you from getting hurt, from being destroyed. And finally, there Jacob is, and he is alone. Jacob, the overreacher, the wrestler, alone in the moonlight, anticipating losing everything that he's worked his entire life to accumulate. And that's when something surprising happened. Here comes a man out of the shadows, and a wrestling match ensues. Sweaty, stinky, dusty, out of breath, hour after hour after hour. Jacob's determination his entire life was, I will win. I am going to win. Uh, and all of his life, he'd been number two, the underdog, the weak one, and he always found a way to keep from being bested. He started at the back of the pack, and he always found a way to make it to the front. I will come out on top. And so that's the way this wrestling match went. Jacob refused to lose. He just refused. See, he thought the wrestling match was about winning, because wasn't everything about winning? Well, when the man saw that Jacob's not going to give in, he reached out, he wrenched Jacob's hip. But Jacob's like a bulldog. He is not going to let go. And the man says, let me go. The day is breaking. And Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. It's like, what? Wait a minute here. Why do you need another blessing? Look at everything you have. Like, you've already received the blessing of your father Isaac on numerous occasions. There's more than one occasion we even have a record of it. My life would be okay if ... You are exceedingly wealthy. Why do you need this man's blessing? The man says to him, what's your name? And Jacob says, Jacob, the overreacher, the heel holder. Underneath it all, what is Jacob reaching right past? What's he missing? How's he trying to fill in that blank? My life would be okay if. He says, your name will no longer be called Jacob. Your name is Israel, striver with God, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have, it's an interesting word, reached. You have reached. Some translations say overcome. Yahol, it's his entire life. This wrestling match has been external for him. It's always been out there, outside of himself. It's been with his brother, with his father, with Laban, his uncle. And now God is showing him, Jacob, your true wrestling match, it's right here. It's you and me. And maybe life isn't about winning. Your entire life, you've been trying to do this external wrestling match, and you've never come face to face learning how to do one of the most good and beautiful, most vulnerable things that you can do, which is trust. And Jacob says, please, tell me your name. And the man won't do it. He instead gives Jacob the thing that he's been chasing externally and reaching right past. He gives him a new name, a new identity, a blessing. It's like Jacob has been searching for a blessing his whole life, but it hasn't meant, he's still asking, it hasn't meant what it should mean to him. The wrestling match isn't about winning, it's about who is the wrestling match with. That's what it's about. Trust. And so dawn is breaking, and Jacob, Israel, is blessed, and the man leaves. And Jacob says, I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. When people go through an experience like this where they've been overreaching their entire life, it's like I propped my ladder against the wrong wall, but then they realize it, and I'm accepting this new identity from God, and I'm moving my life, I'm reorienting my entire life towards God. And it takes a while to sink in. And man, if you climbed up that ladder a long ways, and now you're realizing I'm restarting some things, sometimes you come away with a limp from that wrestling match. There was hardly any time to reflect on the meaning of it all because the wrestling match is over and Jacob looks up and there on the horizon, there's his brother with all of his troops, 400 men. And so quickly, he divides the children among the wives. He puts his Rachel and Joseph, his favorites, at the back. He limps to the front and he starts bowing to his brother like a servant bows to a ruler. He bows 7 times, bowing over and over and over. And they're both brothers. They're in their 90s as they approach each other. And when Esau sees Jacob, he breaks into a run and he has tears running down his cheeks and he wraps his brother up in an embrace. He plants a kiss on him. Now, Jacob had anticipated maybe being attacked by his brother, who he fooled and stole from and separated from, but now his brother's embracing him and his brother's crying. And it takes him off guard, but only for a moment. And then he's caught up in the reunion and he's embracing his brother and the tears are flowing. I imagine tears of relief for Jacob, for Israel. And then, of course, Esau looks up and he sees all of these people, these family members, 4 wives, 11 sons, who knows how many daughters, slaves, servants. So, who are all these people with you? So, family introductions are in order. Esau's very next question, what's the meaning of all these flocks and all these herds that I met? And so Jacob keeps pursuing his goal. He says, to find favor in your eyes, my Lord. He's still at it with that same thing. Now, Esau is ready to be done. Let bygones be bygones. The whole birthright thing, that happened 20 years ago. We're both wealthy now. Like, he says, I already have plenty, my brother. I have enough. Keep what you have for yourself. But Jacob, he's not ready to be brothers. Their past is still very much alive. And, if your entire life is a wrestling match, it's really hard to trust anyone. It just is. And so he's looking around at this scenario. He sees 400 men surrounding his family. And all Esau has to do is snap his fingers, and they'll be as good as dead. He says, no, please. Please, if I have found favor in your eyes, will you accept this gift from me? Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. He says, now that you've received me favorably, will you please accept these presents that I brought to you? God's been gracious to me. I have all I need. And so because he's insisting, Esau accepts the neighing and the braying flocks. All right, very well. Let's be on our way. I will accompany you. We can travel together. But Jacob is still at it with this whole my Lord thing. He says, my Lord knows that the children are tender and that I have to care for the ewes and the cows that are nursing their young. And if I drive them hard, even one day the animals are going to die. So let my Lord, which is Esau, you go on ahead of your servant, which is Jacob, Israel, and I'll move along slowly at a pace that the flocks and the herds before me and the pace of the children, something they can handle until I come to my Lord in Seir. So he's saying, you guys go on ahead. We're going to take a slow pace and we'll catch up. We'll catch up with you. Now, Esau can understand, yeah, if we make 400 men travel the same pace as the children, that could be a little bit tedious. And so he wants to do something to help his brother. He says, very well, let me leave some of my men with you. Let's offer you some protection. They can help with the animals. It's no trouble to Esau. And it'd be a help to Jacob. But Jacob is still at it with this finding favor thing. He says, just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord. Like, that's all I want. And those are his very last words to his brother, recorded in the Bible. They part ways, the 2 brothers. And Esau starts on his way back with his 400 men. going home to Seir, fully expecting my brother's coming behind me. And I imagine all the way he's thinking about the party they're going to throw at home. And man, can you imagine how happy Dad's going to be when he sees Jacob after 20 years? Well, he can't see, but when he hears his voice and embraces him. But Jacob, he doesn't go home. After his brother leaves, after telling him, I'm coming behind you and I'm going to Seir, I'm going where you're going, goes the other way. He never shows up. He turns around, he travels in the opposite direction, and he goes to Succoth. And he builds a home. He builds pens for his flocks and herds. Why? Like, it's like he wants to know his brother's not coming after him, but he doesn't want the relationship. Why doesn't he tell him, I'm not headed in your direction? It's like he's still doing this old, deceptive, strategic, I have to win, I have to control my external world, the external wrestling match kind of stuff. Because learning how to trust someone and be vulnerable with them takes time. And he just has barely begun down that road. We can't learn to trust others very well if we haven't learned how to do this internal wrestling match, this trust thing with God. So your conflicts that are external, they all get sugar-coated with appeasement. Yeah, I'll give you some stuff to make you happy. But your true wrestling match is right here. We're only told of one other time that the brothers ever saw one another, and it's when they're burying their father, Isaac. So does Israel ever come face to face with the God inviting him to wrestle in such a way that he learns to trust, in such a way that he learns to trust others? What I love about this story is that we can find ourselves in the characters. We can find ourselves in Jacob, in Israel, overreaching, set on winning, thinking life is all about winning, and externalizing all these things that are actually, it's right here is the issue, but we make it all out there. And yet there's God blessing, accepting, showing us what we do have, and giving us, showing us, this is who you are, this is your identity. And yeah, limping is a part of it. It's painful to learn that life is not all about what I was reaching for. And we struggle to accept this God-given identity. We miss opportunities where we could have learned to trust, but missed them. And so God comes back over and over. The book of Genesis has more than one time that God comes back to Jacob and says, you're Israel, remember? You're striving with me. You're striving with God now. And so God brings us back time and time again to face the internal wrestling match, the conversation with God, and to show us it's not all about winning. It's about who are you doing this dialogue, this wrestling match with? Who are you face to face with? Which is learning trust. It's, am I learning how to orient my entire life towards God? So the question at the end of the day is, how's your wrestling match? Are you making the things about everyone else and about all of the conditions out there so that you can stay away from what's right here, the stuff that you should and could be wrestling out with God, accepting your God-given identity? That's the question. Love you, friends.